Welcome, Graham Smith from Alec here again, talking about Section 4 of the NCALNE VOC. So this is the diagnostic assessment side of things. So we'll just talk through what you need to know about the assessment task for Section 4, and this relates of course to knowing the learner and using appropriate literacy and numeracy diagnostic tools and processes. So here's our heads up slide again, so you can see where you fit in terms of the training and assessment tasks, and it shows how the course tracks through the 7 basic areas required by the unit standards and the qualification. And these are the 7 areas that relate to the baseline knowledge for embedding literacy and numeracy. So where you're up to now, you need to complete the task for assessment, which relates to diagnostic. You can see diagnostic at the top there in the green box. Okay, let's have a look at what's next. Right, so just to reinforce, this is about the knowing the learner section of the TEC triangle that we've had a look at previously. And that triangle is in the center of the previous slide. What do you need to do? Basically, you have to have a go at doing some literacy and numeracy diagnostic assessment in a safe and controlled way. And it's just the process that we're after for your training, for this qualification, for our evidence collection purposes. And it's your business and your organization's business how you implement these processes afterwards. And we really hope that you do implement them and that they permeate their way through your organization. For us though, you need to track a couple of learners, and by that we mean a minimum of 2. At least 2 learners through a couple of different assessment tasks. So as you go through, you also need to complete the task 4 template, which will prompt you for all the necessary information. In a nutshell, you need to use literacy numeracy diagnostics, and we recommend that one of these is the TEC assessment tool. If you can, it's best to use the online version. If you can't, please use the paper-based version, as well as using the TEC assessment tool as your major kind of big picture diagnostic tool. We want you to use 2 mini diagnostics of your own creation, one for literacy and one for numeracy. And like I said before, you need to track at least 2 learners through this process. And if you think you're going to lose some learners along the way, better to start with a whole group, at least 3 or 4, or maybe your whole class. If you do start with your whole class, then you can certainly just pick out the 2 or 3 that you want to work with, or the data, whose data you want to work with at a later stage. But at least 2 learners is what we need for our purposes. One of the things that you'll do through this process is you'll use some of this data to create literacy and numeracy focused learning plans for these learners. Now, just talking about the mini diagnostic tests that you're going to adapt or create yourself, think of these as mini pre and post tests to go on either side of your literacy and numeracy interventions. You're going to create some pre-tests, one for literacy and one for numeracy, or at least one for literacy and at least one for numeracy. Think of that pre-test as a bookend. It's the first bookend and it relates to task 4. Then you're going to do some embedded literacy and numeracy delivery, which is going to target certain things that you've chosen. That's going to be your work for task 5. And then when you retest your learners or reassess your learners using another version, or perhaps even the same version of this pre-test that you've created, you'll be using it as a post-test. That evidence then works for you for assessment task 6, but we'll talk about that a bit further down the track. The main point here, think of them as pre and post tests to go on either side of your literacy and numeracy interventions. Okay, once you've done this work, once you've done the testing, the assessment, you need to summarize your learners' literacy and numeracy needs using the template. You need to supply copies of the completed diagnostic assessments that they have done for you, and you also need to supply us with copies of the learning plans that you're putting together. And we've got templates for all of these things as well on the website that you can download. Choose your learners well. You need to assess at least 2, and like I said, you can pick a whole group if you want to, but we need a minimum of 2. Try and pick 2 that you can track through this whole embedded project. That means you want to use them for task 5 and task 6 as well. Don't pick 2 learners that you know are already brilliant that would be missing the point and just a waste of your time. So pick 2 learners that you know could benefit from some increased focus on literacy and numeracy skills development. Does that make sense? Alright, at least one of your mini diagnostics needs to be contextualized, and we'd recommend actually, why don't you make both of them contextualized, but for the purposes of the unit standard, at least one needs to be. And here we're talking specifically about these mini diagnostics that you're creating yourself or adapting perhaps. So contextualize them to your training environment, to your course that you're teaching or the work that you do. Once you've done this, once you've carried out this assessment, you should be able to use your working knowledge of the learning progressions to map your learners in terms of the relevant steps and progressions and basically working out where they're at. So what we're after here is your best guess analysis. It's the same skill that you used when you did your best guess analysis of your course training demands, the literacy training demands, and the numeracy training demands back in task 3. And this best guess analysis of your learners, it should back up or be supported by what you're finding out using your diagnostic assessment tools. So that includes using the TEC assessment tool, using your own assessment tool. So there's really 3 things there. It's the TEC assessment tool, it's your own literacy and numeracy contextualized diagnostics, and it's your mapping of your learners. It's those 3 things that are going to tell us where your learners are at. When you write it up, the template asks you to do certain things, and there's different sentence starters like this one on the screen for you to use. Feel free to ignore them if you're happy just writing about all of this stuff. However, if you don't want to think about that, use the sentence starter. It's just to get you going and write a paragraph about each one. So for example, once you've done your analysis on your learner, you might be able to say something like this. There's a big gap between what learner A actually knows versus what she has to do. This is ... and you could go on and give some support there for it. So what are we trying to achieve here? Basically, it's just you having a go at using some different literacy and numeracy diagnostic assessments so that you can figure out a bit more about your learners, and that's going to inform your teaching and inform the resources and the activities that you're going to do. Kia ora, thanks very much. See you next time.